Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes, Marlin. I see it. It's beautiful.
So, Coral, when you said you wanted an ocean view, you didn't think you were going to get the whole ocean, did you? Huh? Oh, yeah. A fish can breathe out here. Did your man deliver, or did he deliver?
My man delivered.
And it wasn't so easy.
Because a lot of other clownfish had their eyes on this place.
You better believe they did. Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm. You did good. And the neighborhood is awesome.
So you do like it, don't you?
No. I do. I really do like it. But Merlin, I know that the drop-off is desirable with the great schools and the amazing view and all that, but do we really need so much space?
Coral, honey, these are our kids we're talking about. They deserve the best. Look. They'll wake up, poke their little heads out, and they see a whale passing right by their bedroom window.
You're gonna wake the kids.
Oh, right.
Aw, look. They're dreaming. We still have to name them.
You want to name all of them right now? All right. We'll name this half Marlin Jr., and then this half Coral Jr. Okay, we're done.
I like Nemo.
Nemo? Well, we'll name one Nemo, but I'd like most of them to be Marlin Jr.
Just think in a couple of days, we're gonna be parents.
Yeah. What if they don't like me?
Marlin.
Oh, really?
There's over 400 eggs. Odds are one of them is bound to like you. What?
You remember how we met?
Well, I try not to.
Well, I remember. Excuse me, miss. Can you check and see if I have a hook in my lip?
Marlin!
Oh, you gotta look closer because it's way in here. Here he is. Cutie's here. Where did everybody go? Coral, get inside the house, Coral. No, Coral, don't. They'll be fine. Just get inside, you, right now.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Danik Port channel. Make sure to subscribe and hit that like button if you enjoy the content. Today, we are going to be discussing the movie Finding Nemo from 2003. The shimmering turquoise waters of the Great Barrier Reef serve as the initial stage for a tale deeply rooted in the anxieties of parenthood. Marlin, a small, somewhat overly cautious clownfish, lives with his meticulously counted clutch of eggs, a vigilance born from a devastating early loss. His mate, Coral, an adventurous spirit whose dreams of the open ocean are palpable, perishes during a barracuda attack, leaving Marlin with only one surviving fry, whom he names Nemo. This singular responsibility shapes Marlin into an overprotective father, someone whose very existence revolves around keeping his son safe within the immediate confines of their anemone home. Nemo, however, inherits some of his mother's latent curiosity. He is also physically distinct, possessing a smaller, less capable, lucky fin, a small imperfection that only fuels Marlin's protectiveness. On Nemo's first day of school, taught by Mr. Ray, a graceful spotted eagle ray whose own vast knowledge of the world stretches far beyond the reef, Nemo feels the pull of the unknown. Against Marlin's frantic warnings, Nemo swims out to explore a boat hovering above, a clear boundary transgression. This act of defiance, fueled by a desire to prove his capability, leads to his capture by a human diver, a figure of pure, terrifying unknown for Marlin. The loss throws Marlin into a state of near catatonic panic. He is suddenly forced out of his comfortable, predictable existence and into the terrifying expanse of the ocean. His initial desperate pursuit is met by Dory, a blue tang whose boundless optimism is tragically offset by her severe short-term memory loss. Dory, despite her affliction, possesses an undeniable, almost inconvenient warmth and a surprising loyalty. Their immediate bond is forged through necessity when they encounter a trio of distinctly relaxed, yet dangerously charismatic sharks, Bruce, Anchor, and Chum, who are attempting to reform their diet by adhering to a vegetarian pledge, an endeavor that quickly crumbles when blood is introduced. Marlin and Dory survive this encounter and continue their journey, driven by a crucial piece of information: a diver's address written on the mask left behind. Their path takes them over the deep ocean floor, where they narrowly avoid a terrifying encounter with an anglerfish, a creature whose bioluminescent lure serves as a grim metaphor for false hope. Dory's innate sense of direction, even when unreliable, guides them toward the East Australian current, where they meet Crush, a laid-back, ancient green sea turtle, whose entire philosophy seems to be about going with the flow, embodying the very freedom Marlin fears. Crush's perspective, shared with his son Squirt, offers a fleeting glimpse of letting go that Marlin cannot yet embrace. Meanwhile, Nemo finds himself in a drastically different environment, a dentist's office aquarium in Sydney, Australia. This glass prison is ruled by Gil, an intensely charismatic Moorish idol with the bearing of a seasoned escape artist who has clearly spent time observing the world beyond the glass. Gil, whose scars tell tales of previous, failed escape attempts, sees in Nemo the perfect tool for their ultimate breakout. The tank's inhabitants are a motley crew, a collection of nervous fish who have accepted their fate, including a pessimistic pufferfish named Bloat and a hyperactive shrimp. Gil's grand plan involves Nemo navigating the filtration system to disable the debris-blocking mechanism. Marlin and Dory, having been ejected from the EAC, face another formidable challenge: a vast field of jellyfish. Dory, with her fearless willingness to plunge into the danger, inadvertently proves instrumental in navigating this hazard. Their subsequent rescue by a friendly whale, who communicates only through massive, echoing vocalizations that Marlin struggles to comprehend, further tests Dory's communicative spirit and Marlin's ability to trust something beyond his control. Back in the dentist's office, Nemo, striving to earn Gil's respect and prove his worth, undertakes the dangerous task of jamming the filter. The act is symbolic. He is finally asserting a degree of agency. However, the stress of the situation causes him to inflate, nearly crushing himself. This near tragedy forces a moment of clarity in Gil, who realizes the cost of their desperate freedom. Marlin and Dory finally reach Sydney Harbor, guided by Dory's unexpected, though temporary, memory restoration prompted by the sight of the city lights. They encounter Nigel, a well-meaning but often clumsy pelican who has a friendly connection to the dentist. Nigel ferries them toward the office just as the tank inhabitants are executing their latest escape attempt. The climax is a whirlwind of confusion. The dentist, attempting to clean the tank, is startled, and the fish are flushed down the drain. Nemo, separated from the others, is nearly swept away, but Marlin arrives just in time. Their reunion is fraught with emotion, a father realizing his son must be allowed to swim on his own, and a son understanding the depth of his father's love. The escape is ultimately successful, though not in the way Gil planned. The fish, including Nemo, end up in the harbor. Marlin and Nemo, finally comfortable with the necessary distance between them, swim toward the open ocean. The experience has irrevocably changed both of them. Marlin has learned the crucial lesson that love requires risk, while Nemo has learned that true strength isn't about avoiding danger, but about facing the world, imperfections and all. Dory, whose memory remains unreliable, finds her place simply by being with them, a constant bright presence in their newly expanded world. The journey back to the reef, though physically shorter, thanks to the returning tide and the relative calm that follows genuine terror, is emotionally significant. Marlin, stripped bare of his rigid control, begins to see Dory not as a liability, but as an essential companion, a living embodiment of the present moment that he has spent his entire adult life trying to avoid. Dory's relentless cheerfulness, initially grating, now acts as a necessary balm against the lingering echoes of the Barracuda attack. She moves through the ocean with an almost spiritual lack of concern for the future, a trait that gradually begins to infect the tightly wound Marlin. Their interactions are a study in contrasts. Marlin, whose internal monologue is a constant ticker tape of potential threats, views every shadow as a predator. Dory, on the other hand, sees every shadow as a potential friend, perhaps one who has forgotten their shared history just seconds ago. When they encounter a school of fish performing a complex synchronized ballet, Marlin is initially suspicious, viewing the coordination as a sophisticated lure. Dory, however, dives straight in, drawn by the sheer beauty of the collective movement, momentarily pulling Marlin along into the pure joy of participation. It is through these shared, unplanned moments he would have fiercely guarded against before Nemo's abduction, that Marlin starts to loosen his grip on the trauma. The sheer vastness of the Pacific Ocean, which Marlin perceives as an endless, hostile void, is navigated by Dory's unexpected moments of clarity. There is a scene where Dory, momentarily recalling her past, recognizes the pattern of the stars, a skill hinting at a former life of purpose that her amnesia has erased. This fleeting return to capability reinforces the idea that everyone, even the seemingly broken or flawed, possesses an essential contribution. For Marlin, who judged his own worth solely on his ability to protect, seeing Dory succeed despite her severe limitation is a profound lesson in unconditional acceptance. When they finally reach the vicinity of the dentist's office, guided by Nigel's slightly panicked eyewitness account, the emotional stakes for both Nemo and Marlin are peaking. Nemo, having experienced the near-fatal consequences of the flush, understands the terrifying reality of the human world, but more importantly, he has felt the visceral, terrifying fear of disappointing his father and the overwhelming relief of his father's presence. The reunion underwater is not a neat Hollywood embrace. It is messy, punctuated by the chaos of the fish being unceremoniously dumped into the harbor. Marlin's first reaction is still parental control, to grab Nemo and retreat. But Nemo, having navigated the terror of the pipes and the terror of the ocean alongside other survivors, pushes back, not with defiance, but with quiet assertion. He tells his father he is okay, demonstrating a self-reliance born from necessity, not rebellion. Watching Nemo swim freely in the harbor, not darting frantically toward his father, but moving with confident, measured strokes, is the visual culmination of Marlin's internal transformation. He sees the lucky fin, once a symbol of weakness to be compensated for, now propelling his son with competence. The anxiety doesn't vanish. It is too deeply ingrained, but it recedes to a manageable background hum, replaced by a quiet pride. The return to the reef is quiet. The entire community, having followed the saga through whispered reports and sightings, gathers. Marlin no longer needs to recount the dangers of the outside world. The very sight of Nemo, whole and independent, tells the story. Dory, seamlessly integrated into their lives, provides the necessary element of unpredictable light. Her presence ensures that the reef, which had become a sanctuary of fear for Marlin, is now permanently expanded to include the possibility of the unknown, a place where forgetting is just another way of staying present. The final image is of Marlin watching Nemo swim out towards a sea anemone, not with a paralyzing fear, but with the subtle, almost imperceptible nod of a father who has finally learned that letting go is the highest form of love. The immediate aftermath of their return brings a palpable sense of closure, though the true healing is only just beginning. The established social order of the reef, which had operated under the assumption of Marlin's perpetual fragility and Nemo's necessary confinement, begins to subtly shift. The other clownfish parents, who had previously treated Marlin with a mix of pity and awkward distance, now regard him with a newfound, if slightly bewildered, respect. They saw the man, or fish, who dared to cross the entire ocean based on a flimsy pair of glasses. Nemo, however, is the quiet epicenter of this change. He is no longer just the boy with the damaged fin. He is the one who saw the dentist's office and survived the great blue emptiness. His first venture out after the ordeal is tentative, yet resolute. He doesn't immediately seek out danger, but rather explores the boundaries of the reef with a newfound confidence, constantly glancing back at his father, not out of fear of being left behind, but to gauge his reaction. It is a subtle reversal of roles. Now Nemo is subtly reassuring Marlin. Marlin, embracing his new, lighter existence, finds himself engaging more with the community, primarily because Dory has made it impossible not to. Dory's memory lapses continue, providing endless moments of comic relief and surprising sincerity. She might introduce Marlin as a brave explorer to a passing angelfish, only to forget who he is 5 minutes later and introduce him again with the same effusive praise. This forced repetition of positive affirmation slowly erodes Marlin's ingrained skepticism. He begins to participate in communal activities, such as the communal algae gathering expeditions, where before he would have stayed near his anemone. Cataloging sand grains. Crush and Squirt make a surprise visit, riding the currents near the outer edge of their territory. Their appearance is a reminder of the sheer, exhilarating velocity of life lived without attachment. Crush speaks of the great currents as if they were personal friends, offering Marlin a simple piece of wisdom. You gotta just let the ocean carry you sometimes, little fella. That's where the real fun is. This casual philosophy, delivered by a being who has lived for over 100 years by being flexible, resonates deeply with Marlin. He smiles, a genuine, unforced expression that crinkles the skin around his eyes, a gesture rarely seen since coral. The most telling sign of Marlin's evolution occurs during a small school outing to a relatively shallow patch of seagrass. A young damselfish, mimicking Nemo's earlier foolish bravado, darts toward a cluster of sea urchins, an unnecessary risk. Instinctively, Marlin begins to issue a sharp reprimand, but he stops himself mid-sentence. Instead of shouting, he swims calmly to the youngster, gently guides him back, and speaks in a measured tone, explaining the why of the danger, not just the threat. He is teaching caution, not fear. Nemo watches this exchange, an almost imperceptible nod of approval passing between father and son. The reign of pure, reactive anxiety is over. The era of measured, conscious guidance has begun. The quiet integration of Dory into the fabric of the reef community is perhaps the most enduring testament to the transformative power of the adventure. Initially, the other residents viewed her as an eccentric outsider, her cheerful but repetitive greetings a source of mild confusion. However, her unwavering loyalty to Marlin and Nemo, a loyalty that transcended memory loss, slowly earned her a special protected status. She became the reef's unofficial court jester, and paradoxically, its purest moral compass. When disagreements arose, Dory's simple, immediate desire for everyone to be friends often cut through petty squabbles with surprising effectiveness. Nemo, meanwhile, begins to explore the concept of mentorship. Inspired by Jill's desperate yet highly organized attempts at freedom, Nemo starts organizing the younger fish in his class. He doesn't attempt elaborate escape scenarios. Rather, he applies Gill's strategic thinking to practical reef life. He devises a system for tagging and identifying the best patches of phytoplankton during feeding time, utilizing his small size and quick maneuvers, the very traits that made him vulnerable before, as assets for efficiency. Mr. Ray, the patient teacher, watches this development with quiet satisfaction, recognizing in Nemo the spark of leadership tempered by real-world experience. He starts inviting Nemo to sit near him during lessons about ocean geography, allowing the young clownfish to contribute observations from the distant, perilous world he glimpsed. Marlin finds himself drawn into Dory's world of immediate sensation. While he still meticulously tracks the tides and the movement of the sun, Dory often pulls him toward unusual sights. One afternoon, she leads him to a vast field of bioluminescent algae blooming near a deep trench. Marlin's first instinct is to retreat from the strange glowing depths, anticipating some lurking anglerfish. But Dory simply floats, mesmerized by the soft, pulsing light. "It's like the stars, Marlin," she murmurs, a rare moment of evocative description breaking through her fog. He watches her face illuminated by the cool blue light, and for a moment, he doesn't see the flawed, forgetful fish. He sees the resilient companion who kept him moving when his own resolve had shattered. He drifts closer, allowing the strange, otherworldly light to wash over him, an act of voluntary exposure to the beautiful unknown. This willingness to embrace the unplanned leads to an interesting interaction with Bruce, the reformed shark. Bruce, having committed to his new path, occasionally ventures near the reef periphery to show his commitment, often accompanied by nervous Anchor and Chum. Marlin, who would have once fled instantly, finds himself capable of a brief, civil exchange with Bruce. He acknowledges the shark's struggle, seeing a reflection of his own internal battle, the constant effort to suppress old, dangerous instincts. Bruce, sensing Marlin's reduced panic, offers a hesitant compliment on Nemo's bravery. These small, reconstructed relationships, the mending of the lines that fear had severed, demonstrate that the ocean is not simply defined by predators and prey, but by the context of the moment. Marlin is learning that context is mutable, and his perception is the only true cage. The reef settles into a new rhythm, one characterized by cautious optimism rather than paralyzing vigilance. Marlin's evolution is subtle but profound, noticeable in the way he interacts with the currents. He no longer fights every surge of water. Instead, he uses the familiar flows to travel short distances, recognizing the ocean's inherent energy rather than just its potential danger. This newfound flow state extends to his parenting philosophy. When Nemo expresses a desire to explore the deeper, darker drop-off zone, an area Marlin once considered an absolute no-fly zone, Marlin does not forbid it outright. Instead, he initiates a dialogue, a stark contrast to his former dictates. "What is it you hope to see down there, Nemo?" Marlin asks, his tone curious rather than accusatory. Nemo, understanding the shift, explains that he is curious about the patterns of the deep-sea bioluminescence, having heard Dory describe them poetically. This intellectual curiosity satisfies Marlin. He agrees to the exploration, but with conditions rooted in respect, not control. They establish clear check-in points, routes illuminated by phosphorescent algae that Marlin helped cultivate near the reef's edge, blending safety measures with Nemo's burgeoning sense of adventure. Dory, in her inimitable way, solidifies her place by becoming the reef's designated finder of lost things. Because she frequently forgets what she has just seen, she also frequently rediscovers things. Lost shells, misplaced coral fragments, or even misplaced juveniles who wander too far are often discovered by Dory wandering aimlessly, her memory wiping the slate clean just enough for her to approach each rediscovery with fresh excitement. The reef residents learned to rely on her cheerful, meandering patrols, turning her affliction into a functional, if unpredictable, neighborhood watch system. The impact of Gil's influence also ripples outward. After the near-fatal flushing incident, Gil remains largely withdrawn, humbled by the realization that his obsession nearly cost Nemo his life. However, he begins to use his impressive knowledge of plumbing and human machinery, gained from years spent observing the dentist's office, to benefit the tank community in smaller, safer ways. He designs a makeshift siphon system to direct nutrient-rich water flow more effectively into the slower-growing corals in their section of the tank, applying his escape artistry to environmental engineering. He becomes the resident expert on external threats, teaching the younger, more impressionable fish about the patterns of the dentist's cleaning schedule, not as a trigger for escape, but as a lesson in environmental awareness. One evening, as the sun sets and casts long shadows across the anemones, Marlin watches Nemo interact with Dory. Nemo is patiently explaining to Dory, for the 10th time that day, how to tell the difference between a benign sea cucumber and a venomous sea snake using slow, deliberate gestures. Dory listens intently, her blue eyes wide, before confidently declaring that the sea cucumber looks like a very friendly but slightly confused eel. Nemo laughs, a genuine, unburdened sound. Marlin realizes that the greatest danger he ever faced wasn't the barracuda or the vastness of the ocean. It was the self-imposed isolation, born of unchecked fear. He swims over, resting his side against his son's. A simple gesture of presence that speaks volumes more than any anxious warning ever could. The future remains wide open, and for the first time in a long time, Marlin is ready to swim into it alongside his son. The quiet triumph of integration inevitably leads to the next developmental stage: sustained independence. Nemo, now a recognized figure of resilience among the younger reef dwellers, begins to look beyond the immediate perimeter of their familiar habitat, not with the reckless abandon of his initial defiance, but with informed curiosity. He starts to associate with a group of slightly older, more seasoned reef fish who have begun venturing out to harvest the larger, more nutrient-dense sea sponges that grow just past the territorial boundary, marked by a distinctive ancient brain coral. Marlin initially watches these expeditions with the familiar tension tightening his gills, but he consciously reins in the urge to intervene. He observes Nemo learning the subtle art of negotiation with these older peers, how to contribute effectively, how to manage risk within a group dynamic that relies on mutual accountability, something far more complex than simply obeying a single, anxious father. Nemo's lucky fin, no longer a point of shame or overcompensation, becomes an asset in maneuvering the sponges, providing a unique pivot point that allows him to anchor himself against stronger undercurrents while others struggle. Dory, meanwhile, undertakes her own form of self-discovery, albeit one constantly reset by her memory. She becomes fascinated by the concept of sound, particularly the low, resonant thrumming that sometimes drifts down from the whale migration routes far above. She spends hours attempting to communicate with the distant noises, often trailing off mid-sentence, only to begin a completely new line of inquiry moments later. Marlin, recognizing her need for connection, gently steers her toward the humpback whale song recordings that Mr. Ray occasionally plays for the class, echoes of their past journey. Hearing the familiar, enormous voices brings Dory a fleeting sense of belonging, a sense that she was once part of something vast and significant. These moments are precious to Marlin, as they offer him a glimpse into the depth of the companion he found in chaos. Gil, back in the dentist's tank, finds a new kind of peace through instruction. Recognizing that true escape might be impossible, he focuses on enriching the lives of the captive fish. He dedicates himself to teaching them about the aesthetics of the outside world they occasionally glimpse through the window, identifying cloud shapes, the colors of passing boats, and the patterns of the city lights. He transforms the aquarium from a prison awaiting escape into a curated observation post. His demeanor softens. The hard, desperate edge of the career criminal gives way to the quiet authority of the seasoned historian, preserving the memory of freedom for those who cannot taste it. The true marker of Marlin's transformation comes during a sudden, localized storm that whips up the water near the reef. Chaos erupts as the familiar coral structures begin to shift precariously. In the past, Marlin would have immediately sequestered Nemo in the deepest, most protected recess of their anemone. This time, however, Nemo is out with his new friends, securing a vital food source near the sponge beds. Instead of panic, Marlin feels a surge of confidence. He moves swiftly, not to snatch Nemo back, but to aid the others who are struggling against the churning sediment. He utilizes his knowledge of reef structure to anchor loose pieces of coral, working alongside other fathers he previously avoided. When Nemo swims back, safe but slightly muddied, he finds his father not frantic, but tired and satisfied from constructive labor. Marlin looks at his son, sees him standing tall amidst the turbulence, and offers a simple, open affirmation. "Good work, son. Hold steady." It is the language of partnership, replacing the language of fear, signaling that the old Marlin has finally settled into the quiet history of the new one. The slow, steady work of rebuilding trust and redefining boundaries reaches its most satisfying point when Nemo decides to take on a teaching role himself, extending the circle of care outward. Inspired by Mr. Ray's patient pedagogy and Marlin's newfound calmer approach to instruction, Nemo organizes a small reef safety patrol for the very youngest fry, fish barely a few days old. He uses his small stature and intimate knowledge of the reef's nooks and crannies to point out safe pathways and hidden crevices that shield the tiny ones from mild currents. Marlin watches these sessions, often sitting slightly apart, close enough to ensure safety, but far enough not to overshadow. He observes how Nemo uses encouragement rather than commands, his voice clear and steady, devoid of the edge that once signaled Marlin's own deep-seated terror. There is a moment where a young clownfish stumbles near a patch of mild stinging tentacles. Before Nemo can even move, Marlin's body tenses, an automatic Pavlovian response honed by years of hypervigilance. But Nemo handles it with such grace, a quick verbal redirection and a gentle nudge, that Marlin actually relaxes his fins mid-tense. It is a small physical event, but it signifies a massive internal shift. Marlin's reflexive fear is now overridden by his trust in his son's capability. Dory, meanwhile, continues her unpredictable social integration. Her most significant contribution during this calmer period is her uncanny ability to bridge gaps between species who might otherwise ignore each other. Her short attention span prevents her from holding on to interspecies rivalries or historical slights. She might, for instance, spend an entire morning attempting to share a piece of particularly tasty plankton with a shy, territorial damselfish, completely unaware of the long-standing feud between the damselfish clan and the clownfish family. By the time the damselfish accepts the offering, Dory has forgotten why they were arguing in the first place, leaving behind only the positive residue of shared food and companionship. Marlin realizes that Dory's forgetfulness is a form of radical forgiveness, a continuous opportunity for new beginnings that the more mindful reef inhabitants sorely lack. The relationship with the larger, more established members of the reef deepens as well. Crush and Squirt occasionally circle back, drawn by the familiar sounds of the reef. Crush, seeing Marlin not as a frantic father, but as an engaged community member, offers a gift. A piece of exceptionally durable, perfectly shaped, naturally buoyant seaweed that he recommends for reinforcing the edges of the anemone home against unexpected strong surges. This is not a grand gesture of rescue, but a nod of respect between equals navigating the same vast environment. Marlin accepts it not as a necessary tool for survival, but as a token of shared experience. The final acceptance of the past comes when a school of travelers passing through the Great Barrier Reef on a long migration asks Marlin to recount his journey to find Nemo. In the past, this request would have sent Marlin into a spiraling recounting of every danger, focusing on the sheer terror of the open ocean. Now he pauses, looks at Nemo swimming confidently beside him, and at Dory, who is trying to convince a sea cucumber that it looks exactly like her long-lost friend, Steve. Marlin smiles and begins his story differently. He speaks not just of the barracuda and the anglerfish, but of the incredible kindness of the whale, the liberating perspective of the sea turtles, and the unwavering guiding light of his unlikely friend. He frames the narrative not as a catalog of near-death experiences, but as a testament to connection found in the most desolate places. The ocean remains vast and dangerous, certainly, but for Marlin it has transformed into a realm filled with potential allies and necessary lessons, a place where he finally feels equipped to live rather than merely survive. The passage of seasons brings a more settled, almost pastoral quality to the reef. Marlin's former hypervigilance has mellowed into a seasoned vigilance, the difference between a coiled spring and a watchful guardian. He finds himself enjoying the long, sun-dappled afternoons, often simply observing the gentle ebb and flow of the anemone tentacles, a sight that once triggered residual anxiety but now signifies home and stability. Nemo's growing confidence manifests in a practical, adventurous spirit. He takes his role as a protector of the younger fry seriously, and during one particularly calm stretch of weather, he decides to venture further out than ever before, guided by the advice of the older fish on where the tastiest krill congregate near a submerged shipwreck. Marlin observes this preparation, Nemo carefully selecting his swimming companions, meticulously checking the currents, and sharing a silent, knowing look with his father, and experiences a profound sense of peace. The need for a lengthy, detailed briefing is gone. The preparation is internal and mutual. Dory, in a moment that borders on the miraculous, experiences an extended period of relative clarity. For nearly an entire day, she seems to remember everything. The name of the school, the details of the dentist's office, and even the specific irritating way Bruce had laughed after trying to eat the fish blood. This clarity is overwhelming for her, and she clings tightly to Marlin and Nemo, exhibiting a deep, almost fearful understanding of how easily she can lose this precious connection. Marlin treats this temporary grace with immense care, not pressing her for details, but simply cherishing the coherence. He sees in her sustained memory the fragility of perfect happiness. It requires constant maintenance, both internal and external. This period of sustained calm is eventually punctuated by a minor crisis that proves the depth of the reef's collective growth. A small, non-native piece of human debris, a shimmering, brightly colored plastic six-pack ring, drifts down and briefly ensnares a small, slow-moving sea slug near the main foraging grounds. Panic flares briefly among the smallest fry. Marlin instinctively starts to move, but Nemo is faster. Remembering Gill's detailed explanations of how human objects behave underwater, Nemo directs the panicked fish to remain still, realizing the ring is buoyant and will likely float upward if disturbed too violently. He coordinates an effort using several small, strong-bodied wrasse to gently nudge the ring upwards toward the surface, effectively neutralizing the immediate threat without violent disruption. Marlin watches this textbook application of external knowledge and group effort, and he feels an overwhelming sense of obsolescence. The best kind of obsolescence for a parent. His son is not just surviving, he is leading, adapting the hard lessons learned from captivity and travel into practical community-saving wisdom. Later that evening, as the reef settles into the deep-sea quiet, Dory, having forgotten the clarity of the previous day, is back to her cheerful repetitions. She bumps gently into Marlin, completely unaware of their recent conversation or the rescue. "Hello," she chirps brightly. "I'm Dory. Have you seen my friend, a little fish named Nemo?" Marlin looks at her, then over at Nemo, who is meticulously cleaning his side of the anemone. He takes a deep breath, the first truly unhurried breath he has taken in years, and smiles genuinely at Dory. "No, Dory," he replies softly, his voice steady and warm. "I haven't seen Nemo, but I think his father is right over there. Why don't we go say hello?" He gently guides her toward the entrance of their home, embracing the perpetual, beautiful looping nature of their friendship, finally understanding that some of the best parts of life must be experienced anew, every single day. The enduring peace of the reef, however, is not a static state, but a dynamic equilibrium constantly being tested by the ocean's inherent vastness. As the seasons cycle, the awareness of the world beyond their immediate safety zone sharpens, particularly for Nemo. Having proven his competence within the reef, the allure of the wider uncharted waters, the very territories his father traversed in desperation, becomes an undeniable pull. This is not a yearning for reckless defiance, as it was before, but a mature desire for earned experience. Nemo begins spending more time near the edge of the shelf, conversing with the veteran parrotfish who report on the shifting sands and the migratory paths of smaller food sources further out. Marlin notices this, but instead of panic, he feels a quiet sense of preparation. He starts teaching Nemo practical navigation techniques based on celestial bodies and subtle shifts in water temperature, skills he'd once considered abstract theory. He's consciously sharing the burden of knowledge, turning his past trauma into Nemo's future preparedness. Dory, in her eternal present tense, remains the vibrant, unpredictable anchor. Her most impactful contribution during this period is almost accidental. She develops a habit of collecting colorful, smooth pebbles and dropping them near the entrance to their anemone, creating a small, shimmering mosaic. Marlin initially views this as simple clutter, but he notices that the pattern of the pebbles somehow seems to ward off small, curious scavengers that might otherwise nip at the anemone's delicate edges, a natural, beautiful deterrent. Dory, without memory of design or intent, has accidentally engineered a small piece of defensive architecture. It is a profound moment for Marlin. Dory's random acts of existence have tangible, positive results, suggesting that true utility often lies outside rigid planning. The influence of Gil, observed secondhand through occasional chatter from visiting sea base that have glimpsed the dentist's tank, takes a turn toward positive legacy. Gil has reportedly begun teaching the younger, more aggressive pufferfish in the tank's sophisticated camouflage techniques, using dental floss scraps and discarded tooth caps to mimic inert debris, lessons in blending in rather than breaking out. This mirrors Marlin's own shift, moving from outright confrontation with the world to sophisticated integration within it. The climax of this settled period arrives subtly. A fierce undertow pulls a large piece of coral scaffolding near the drop-off, the area Nemo had been cautiously exploring, threatening to dislodge several young, inexperienced fry who were foraging there. Marlin and Nemo swim toward the danger simultaneously, moving with synchronized speed, born not of training, but of shared understanding. Where Marlin instinctively tries to physically push the coral back, Nemo remembers a lesson from the deep-sea travel. Leverage against flow. He directs a group of stronger fish to wedge smaller, sturdy stones beneath the shifting base, distributing the pressure. Together, father and son work side by side, their movements complementing each other's strengths, Marlin's experience in assessing structural weaknesses, Nemo's innovative application of leverage. When the danger passes, the exhaustion hits them both. They rest near the edge of the shelf, looking out over the vast, deep blue. Nemo leans against his father, not seeking comfort, but sharing the weight of responsibility. Marlin looks out at the immensity, and for the first time, he does not see an enemy to be survived, but simply the enormous, beautiful space in which his son is now capable of thriving. He squeezes Nemo gently. "It's a big ocean," Marlin says, the observation stated without a tremor of fear. Nemo replies, his voice confident. "I know, Dad, and we know how to swim in it." The story concludes not with a dramatic return, but with the quiet affirmation that they have both fully arrived at a place where the journey continues, respected and shared. The settled rhythm of the reef begins to introduce a new kind of challenge, the inevitable widening of personal worlds. Nemo, now a seasoned young explorer by reef standards, begins forming deeper bonds with fish from neighboring territories, expanding his social map far beyond the protective anemone cluster. He and his new friends start making short, supervised exploratory trips toward the mysterious, vibrant kelp forest, an area known for its rich biodiversity, but also its dense, disorienting thickets. Marlin observes this expansion with a mixture of pride and the faint, ghosting anxiety that will likely never fully dissipate, but which he now recognizes as a natural component of love, rather than a signal for immediate retreat. He trusts Nemo's preparation, yet he insists on one small concession. Nemo must always carry a small reflective shard of shell, a technique borrowed from the deep-sea anglerfish's lure, but repurposed for safety, to reflect light back toward the reef if he gets disoriented in the kelp's shadows. It is a lesson in using the tools of the environment, even the dangerous ones, for constructive means. Dory's role evolves into that of the reef's historian, ironically preserved by her inability to process the present fully. Because she forgets the pain of recent slights or arguments, she is the only one who consistently seeks out every fish, every day, demanding a fresh introduction. This relentless, forgetful pursuit of connection forces old grudges to wither. A crab who had been feuding with a sea snail over territory for months finds himself the recipient of Dory's effusive, daily praise, and eventually the feud simply becomes too much effort to maintain against such persistent, cheerful oblivion. Marlin watches this, recognizing Dory's amnesia as a powerful natural antidote to bitterness. The ripple effect reaches even the dentist's tank, relayed through the latest fish that has been transferred and then quickly returned due to extreme nervousness. Gil, the veteran escape artist, has apparently embraced a role as a philosophical commentator on confinement. He reportedly told the returning fish that the true failure wasn't in attempting escape, but in believing that freedom was only found outside the glass. He has turned the aquarium into a stage for philosophical debate, using the reflections on the glass to discuss the nature of self-imposed boundaries, a clear evolution from his days of plotting physical breakouts. The final test of Marlin's transformation occurs during a communal reef gathering focused on discussing seasonal migrations. A traveling school of vibrant surgeonfish, who have heard the epic tale of Marlin's journey, asks him directly how he managed to keep going when the ocean seemed empty and hostile. Marlin looks at Nemo, who is currently engaged in a spirited, though complex debate, with a young damselfish about the merits of different current patterns. He looks at Dory, currently attempting to teach a passing jellyfish how to play tag. Marlin takes a deep breath, the air tasting clean and familiar. "I didn't keep going because I was brave," he states simply, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled community. "I kept going because I didn't have a choice, but I found my way because I stopped looking only for the threat and started looking for the small, strange lights that kept showing up in the darkness. One light was a reckless friend who forgot everything but how to be loyal. Another was my son, who showed me that being a good father sometimes means learning to watch from a slight distance. The ocean is still terrifying, yes," he concludes, looking directly at Nemo, "but it is also full of excellent swimming partners." He doesn't recount the horrors. He celebrates the companionship. He has integrated the chaos into his reality, not as a scar, but as the foundation for a much larger, more meaningful life. The oceanic expanse in Finding Nemo, a vibrant tapestry woven by Pixar's burgeoning mastery of computer animation, serves as far more than mere backdrop. It is a character unto itself, reflecting and amplifying the internal struggles of its protagonists. At its core, the film is a deeply resonant exploration of parental anxiety, the necessity of maturation, and the delicate balance between protection and independence. Marlin, the clownfish father, embodies the crippling effect of unresolved trauma. His professional life, if one can ascribe such a term to the instinctual existence of a reef fish, has been permanently scarred by the catastrophic loss of his wife, Coral, and nearly all his offspring to a barracuda attack. This singular event calcifies his worldview, transforming him from a cautious individual into a phobic caricature of parenthood. His relentless focus on safety, the very thing that ironically drives him to lose Nemo, is a textbook example of post-traumatic stress, manifesting as over-control. His entire existence pivots on avoiding another loss, rendering him incapable of experiencing joy or trusting the natural flow of life. Nemo, conversely, represents the burgeoning, frustrated drive towards self-actualization. His underdeveloped lucky fin, a congenital disability, becomes both a physical marker of his vulnerability and a symbolic leash held by his father. Nemo's desire to prove himself, to simply be seen as capable, not just fragile, is the engine of the narrative. This adolescent yearning to push boundaries, to interact with the vast, dangerous world outside the reef's perceived safety zone, mirrors the universal human desire for agency. His brief, impulsive decision to touch the boat is not mere defiance, it is a desperate cry for autonomy, a necessary, albeit painful, step away from the shadow of his father's fear. The journey itself is a masterful utilization of diverse environments to test and reshape Marlin. The open ocean, initially a terrifying void, forces him into uncomfortable alliances. Dory, the blue tang with short-term memory loss, acts as the perfect foil to Marlin's rigidity. Her relentless optimism and sheer inability to dwell on past mistakes allow Marlin moments of necessary emotional release. Dory's condition, while played for comedic effect, underscores a philosophical point. Sometimes, forgetting the bad allows one to fully engage with the present good. Her intuitive navigation, guided by instinct and trust rather than rigid adherence to rules, contrasts sharply with Marlin's analytical, fear-based planning. Their path takes them through encounters that highlight different facets of marine society. The Tank Gang, inhabiting the dentist's aquarium in Sydney, represents a micro-society paralyzed by confinement. Their leader, Gil, a Moorish idol scarred by previous escape attempts, embodies the hardened veteran who has seen too much, yet still clings to the dream of freedom. Gil's dedication to returning Nemo to the sea, despite the immense risk, is driven by a vicarious need to see true freedom realized, a desire reflecting the deeper cinematic theme that life's value lies not in preservation, but in experience. The brilliance of the climax lies in its thematic resolution, not just its physical one. Marlin finally learns that true protection is not about preventing all harm, but about equipping the child to handle unavoidable harm. When he trusts Nemo to perform the task of blocking the submarine's intake, he transitions from controller to supporter. Nemo, in turn, finally steps into his own strength, proving that his difference is not a deficit, but a unique attribute that can be leveraged. The film concludes with Marlin accepting the inherent risk of letting go, symbolized by his tentative allowance of Nemo to swim toward the drop-off. This acceptance signifies the maturation of the father figure, allowing the protagonist, the son, to embrace the complex, beautiful, and inherently dangerous reality of his world. Finding Nemo is ultimately a sophisticated allegory for separation anxiety and the creation of identity, proving that the greatest adventure often lies in the perilous space between the known harbor and the infinite sea. The emotional resonance of the film is heavily reliant on the palpable tension between instinctual need and learned behavior. Marlin's initial state is one of extreme emotional rigidity, a defense mechanism honed to a razor's edge by tragedy. We see this in the meticulous, almost obsessive way he manages Nemo's life on the reef. He is a creature of habit because habit means predictability, and predictability means survival. Or so he believes. This neurotic devotion stifles Nemo, creating a psychological pressure cooker. Nemo's attempts at normal adolescent exploration, testing the reef's boundaries, desiring peer interaction, are consistently met with Marlin's fearful pronouncements, effectively stifling the very developmental steps necessary for independent existence. Dory's character functions as the necessary catalyst for Marlin's psychological thaw. Her unrelenting cheerfulness, often bordering on manic energy, forces Marlin out of his deeply ingrained patterns of worry. Her short-term memory loss, while a narrative device to heighten immediate jeopardy, forcing Marlin to constantly re-explain their situation, also serves a profound therapeutic role for Marlin. She cannot hold on to past grievances or anchor herself to previous failures, allowing her to approach every new situation with a clean slate. This infectious, momentary optimism is something Marlin has entirely purged from his system. When Dory instinctively trusts the whales, or when she simply chooses to trust Marlin despite his abrasive nature, she models the very vulnerability he must embrace to succeed. Her ability to navigate by song and feel, rather than by map and memory, represents a wisdom Marlene has forgotten. The wisdom of the ocean itself, which demands fluidity. The darker undercurrents of the film manifest powerfully in the shark encounter scene. Bruce, the great white, striving desperately to adhere to his vegan recovery program, introduces the concept of inherent nature versus conscious choice. The sharks, traditionally the apex predators, are trying to be something they are biologically coded not to be. This mirrors the internal struggle of all characters. Marlin fighting his predator avoidance instinct, Gil battling his deep-sea origins, and Nemo fighting his father's perception of his physical limits. When Bruce's blood triggers the reversion to predatory instinct, the brief, terrifying breakdown of the civilized facade underscores the ever-present danger of the natural world, a danger Marlin has spent his life trying to deny by sheltering Nemo. The Tank Gang offers a fascinating commentary on the false security of manufactured environments. They are creatures of the ocean, yet they have adapted to a sterile, predictable existence defined by the glass walls and the routine feeding schedule of P. Sherman, the dentist. Gil is the most tragic figure here. His scarred body is testament to multiple failed bids for freedom, leaving him cynical but unbroken. His motivation isn't just personal escape. It is about instilling a sense of purpose in the younger, more naive fish, particularly Nemo. Gil recognizes that a life lived only in captivity, however safe, is a life half-lived. His guidance is tough love, pushing Nemo to recognize that external validation, proving himself to his father, is secondary to internal resolve. When Nemo successfully executes the plan to blind Darla, it is an act of controlled, necessary rebellion, a final purification of his own agency before reuniting with his father. Marlin's final act of letting go is emotionally shattering precisely because the audience has witnessed the sheer depth of his terror. When he sees Nemo seemingly killed by the fishing net, Marlin's grief threatens to revert him entirely to his initial trauma state, the overwhelming instinct to simply retreat and accept loss. However, Dory's simple, present-focused plea, "Just keep swimming," coupled with the realization that Nemo is alive and acting independently within the net, breaks the cycle. The reunion is not just relief, it is integration. Marlin sees Nemo not as the fragile object of his protection, but as an active participant in his own survival. The journey rewires Marlin's perception of reality. The ocean, once a terrifying expanse of possibility for loss, transforms into an environment capable of sustaining and challenging his son. The final image of the family swimming together, with Marlin no longer leading the charge but swimming alongside, signifies the hard-won peace found in acceptance of shared vulnerability. The visual language employed by the filmmakers consistently reinforces these emotional states. The palette used for the initial reef scenes is overwhelmingly warm, bright, and saturated, evoking a sense of idyllic safety. Yet this visual warmth paradoxically contains the seeds of Marlin's suffocating fear. As Marlin and Dory venture into the deep, the blues deepen, shifting into cooler, more oppressive tones. The descent into the dark, near monochromatic world of the anglerfish sequence is a brilliant externalization of Marlin's deepest anxieties, the unknown lurking just beyond the edge of his awareness, ready to consume what he holds dear. This environment demands absolute reliance on Dory's momentary light, symbolizing that in moments of profound crisis, logic and planning often yield to fleeting moments of intuition or external guidance. The characterization of Darla, the dentist's niece, deserves further inspection as she functions as the quintessential externalized threat, the avatar of unfeeling chance. She never speaks. Her danger is purely implied through the reaction shots of the fish and the meticulous, almost ritualistic preparation her uncle undertakes for her arrival. Darla is childhood cruelty personified, the force that threatens to crush the nascent independence Nemo has found. Her paper-wrapped presentation, and the chilling image of her receiving a dead fish, underscore the fragility of life when confronted by careless ownership. Her role solidifies the stakes. For Nemo, escaping Darla is not just about returning to the sea, it is about escaping the designation of being a disposable object. Furthermore, the depiction of the vastness of the ocean through the perspective of the pelican Nigel offers a crucial shift in scale. Nigel represents the benevolent, if slightly chaotic, outside world, a figure from the land world briefly intersecting with the oceanic drama. His rescue of Marlin and Dory, and his recounting of the little fish with the funny fin, emphasizes that Nemo's plight has already created ripples beyond his immediate circle. This external validation is vital for Marlin. It proves that his actions have consequences recognized by others, lending weight to his panicked, world-spanning quest. Nigel's clumsy, heartfelt heroism contrasts with the cold, impersonal dangers they face, anchoring the narrative in themes of community and reciprocal aid that underpin the film's ultimate resolution. The relationship between Marlin and Dory evolves beyond simple partnership into a form of necessary symbiosis. Marlin provides the structure, the memory, and the goal orientation that Dory lacks. Dory, conversely, provides the emotional elasticity and present-moment awareness that Marlin has systematically destroyed in himself. Their success is predicated on their mutual incompleteness. Marlin needs Dory to teach him how to trust the journey. Dory needs Marlin to provide the destination and the tether to reality that her condition otherwise dissolves. This dynamic beautifully illustrates that true resilience often requires balancing rigidity with flexibility, a lesson learned not through introspection alone, but through shared, active experience in the face of adversity. The film posits that maturity is not arriving at a fixed, safe state, but learning to function optimally while acknowledging and accommodating inherent limitations, both personal and those of the world around you. The final act, centered around the convergence of all narrative threads in the Sydney harbor, masterfully orchestrates the collision of Marlin's manufactured reality with the ocean's untamed truths. The fishing trawler net serves as the ultimate crucible, a physical manifestation of the societal structures and systemic dangers that Marlin had always feared. It is a communal threat, one that cannot be overcome by solitary avoidance or rigid adherence to one-on-one rules, requiring instead the collective instinct of the captured fish. This collective action, the realization that their shared peril necessitates a shared response, is the culmination of the film's social commentary. It shows that even the most isolated individuals, whether the traumatized father or the caged escape artist, find strength in coordinated vulnerability. Nemo's ability to orchestrate the mass-choking maneuver within the net is the apex of his character arc. He is not just surviving, he is leading, utilizing the very physical trait his father obsessed over, his lucky fin, to create the necessary disruption. This moment confirms that his disability was never a fatal flaw, but merely an aspect of his unique configuration that could be strategically employed. For Marlin, watching this unfold is a profound, almost painful epiphany. He witnesses his son exhibiting proactive agency in a high-stakes scenario, an action that demands trust entirely beyond his control. The immediate aftermath, the period of false grief when Marlin believes Nemo is lost to the net, forces him to confront the possibility of losing Nemo even after he has apparently saved him, a devastating lesson that control is an illusion. The subsequent revelation that Nemo is alive, having deliberately submerged himself to escape the net after the collective disruption, provides the necessary emotional pivot. This is where the film cements its core thesis. Freedom requires risk, and love requires acceptance of that risk. Marlin's rush to embrace Nemo is not just paternal relief, it is an apology, an acknowledgement embedded in physical touch that his fear has been the greater danger than the ocean itself. The subsequent scene where Marlin calmly instructs Nemo to swim out toward the drop-off, simply saying, "I trust you," is arguably the most significant dialogue exchange in the film. It's a complete reversal of their initial dynamic, transforming Marlin from a warden into a guide. He has learned that the best way to ensure his child's safety is to equip him with self-trust, not to build higher walls. The return to the reef is marked by a visible shift in the color palette and character demeanor. The initial hypersaturation is replaced by a more balanced, mature light. Marlin's interactions with the reef community are now characterized by relaxed confidence rather than guarded suspicion. He is no longer defined solely by the trauma of Coral's death, but by the active success of his shared journey with Nemo. The film closes not on a note of absolute safety, The dangers of the ocean are implied to still exist, but on a state of dynamic equilibrium, where father and son understand the inherent shared tension between exploration and return. They are now partners navigating the world, ready for the next adventure, fully cognizant of the beautiful, terrifying compromises required for a life fully lived. The subtle but significant change in Marlin's gait and expression upon returning to the reef speaks volumes about the internal transformation achieved. He no longer patrols the anemone with the tight, jerky movements of a man constantly scanning for threats. Instead, his movements possess a newfound economy, a relaxed efficiency that suggests his energy is no longer entirely consumed by hypervigilance. This is the behavioral manifestation of emotional regulation finally taking hold. The trauma has not been erased, but its debilitating grip has been broken by purposeful action and shared experience. Nemo's integration back into reef life is equally transformative. He is no longer the timid subject constantly seeking his father's approval. When he interacts with his schoolmates, there is a quiet self-possession in his posture. His fin is still underdeveloped, but now it is simply a feature, not a focal point of anxiety. His anecdotes about the journey, the terrifying drop-offs, the philosophical whales, the relentless Dory, are shared not as cries for sympathy, but as accomplishments. He has earned his place in the narrative of his own life, shifting from being the object of his father's narrative to being an active co-author. Dory's role in the denouement solidifies her thematic importance as the embodiment of unconditional presence. While Marlin and Nemo have resolved a generational conflict, Dory resolves the conflict with time itself. Her inability to fully process the epic scale of the adventure means that for her, the journey is perpetually fresh. Yet her bond with Marlin remains tangible, rooted in shared actions rather than stored memories. Marlin's protective inclination toward Dory, ensuring she doesn't forget the way home, for instance, shows his evolution. His care is now directed outward in helpfulness, rather than inward as self-protection. He extends the empathy learned from his journey to an external figure, demonstrating that his capacity for connection has expanded beyond the immediate needs of his own child. The legacy of the Tank Gang, though physically separate, also remains potent. Gil's influence is evident in the adventurous spirit Nemo now possesses. The desire to touch the boat, initially a foolish act of defiance, transforms into an understanding of calculated risk, a direct inheritance from Gil's philosophy of aspiration over stagnation. Even the environment of the reef feels different now. It is no longer the entirety of existence, but a base camp. The opening up of the visual field at the film's close suggests a worldview broadened by terrifying proximity to danger and miraculous escape. Finding Nemo concludes not with the eradication of fear, but with the establishment of courage as the default operating system for the central characters, proving that facing the abyss together is the only true antidote to isolation. The final thematic layer settled upon the narrative concerns the nature of memory and legacy within a biological imperative. Marlin's initial obsession with preserving Nemo's life was directly tied to memorializing coral. He was attempting to create a perfect, risk-averse continuation of a life tragically cut short, substituting the vibrant potential of his son for the security of the past. This obsessive focus rendered him functionally incapable of creating new, positive memories with Nemo. The journey, particularly the shared terror and relief, forces the creation of new emotional anchors, strong enough to eventually overwrite the initial trauma. When Marlin finally accepts that Nemo must swim with the open ocean schools, he is implicitly accepting that Nemo's life will unfold differently than coral's, and that this divergence is not failure, but life asserting itself. The motif of the current is crucial here. Marlin initially views currents as unpredictable vectors of danger, to be avoided at all costs. Dory, conversely, is often swept away by them, yet she invariably finds her way back or is guided back by external forces, embodying a fatalistic trust in the flow. The whales represent the ultimate surrender to the current, a massive non-verbal communication that transcends individual fear. When Marlin and Dory enter the whale's massive mouth, it is an act of supreme, necessary vulnerability. Marlin must relinquish his need for control entirely, allowing himself to be swallowed by the incomprehensible scale of the ocean's forces, simply hoping for an opportune expulsion. This experience serves as a necessary cognitive shock, demonstrating that sometimes resistance is more dangerous than yielding to forces larger than oneself. The performance of the voice actors heavily colors these psychological states. Albert Brooks's portrayal of Marlin is a masterclass in tightly controlled vocal anxiety, where every inflection is calibrated to convey suppressed panic, making his eventual moments of calm feel earned and profound. Ellen DeGeneres' Dory, with her buoyant, almost musical vocal improvisations, provides the necessary chaos to crack Marlin's shell. Their chemistry is the film's emotional engine, the methodical structure needing the boundless energy of the accidental optimist to achieve liberation. Ultimately, Finding Nemo succeeds because it grounds its spectacular animation and thrilling sequences in profoundly relatable human anxieties surrounding autonomy and letting go. It argues that parenting is not about building an impenetrable fortress around a child, but about providing the necessary tools, courage, intuition, and self-belief so that when the inevitable storm hits, the child knows how to swim against the current, or perhaps how to simply keep swimming when all else fails. The film's resolution is not the end of danger, but the beginning of shared competence in the face of it. The persistent echo of the film's central theme reverberates in the way the environment itself participates in the character's growth. The sheer scale difference between the protagonists and their surroundings is a continuous visual metaphor for human, or fish, smallness against the immensity of the universe. When Marlin and Dory are tiny specks against the vast, indifferent blue of the open ocean, their reliance on each other intensifies, stripping away pretense and forcing radical honesty. This feeling of being overwhelmed is deliberately contrasted with the claustrophobic yet deceptive security of the dentist's tank. The tank, illuminated by harsh artificial light, symbolizes the danger of a life curated to the point of sterility. It offers the illusion of safety while simultaneously suffocating the instinct for survival that defines true life in the ocean. The character of Crush, the ancient sea turtle, serves as the ultimate counterpoint to Marlin's panicked, linear view of time and risk. Crush and his fellow turtles represent a kind of Zen mastery over the oceanic environment. They are ancient survivors who have fully integrated into the currents, moving with the ocean's energy rather than fighting against it. Their dialogue is characterized by elongated vowels and a slow, deliberate pace, communicating an enviable lack of hurry. When Crush assures Marlin that the little one is fine, he is speaking from a place of deep, inherited wisdom, the knowledge that the young are biologically programmed to adapt, and that intervening too aggressively only impedes this natural process. Marlin's inability to simply ride the East Australian current with them highlights his continued struggle to cede control to natural rhythms, making his eventual adoption of a more relaxed pace with Nemo all the more significant. Furthermore, the recurring motif of eyes, from the magnified, terrifying gaze of the barracuda to the wide, unseeing stare of the anglerfish, and finally to the focused, determined look in Nemo's eye during the net incident, maps the film's progression from external threat to internal mastery. The initial horror is seeing a predator's eye focused solely on consumption. Later, the monstrous eye of the anglerfish sees only its own immediate need, reflecting Marlin's own prior obsession. By the end, when Marlin locks eyes with Nemo across the nets, the gaze signifies mutual recognition and respect, a shared understanding that transcends the terror. This focused vision is a symbol of true sight, the ability to see the inherent worth and capability of the other, free from the distorting lens of fear. The visual journey from shadowed terror to clear-sighted trust forms the bedrock of the film's enduring emotional impact. The narrative's sustained brilliance also lies in how it portrays the necessity of external mentorship, even when the primary relationship is parent-child. Gil, the scarred idolfish, functions as the necessary external male role model whose dedication to freedom contrasts sharply with Marlin's suffocating protection. Gil's career, marked by repeated failures and visible scars, each mark a lesson learned at great cost, provides Nemo with a blueprint for persistent striving. While Marlin teaches caution, Gil teaches ambition. He doesn't just preach escape, he designs complex strategies, forcing the tank residents to think beyond their immediate glass confines. This mentorship is crucial because it offers Nemo a perspective untainted by Marlin's specific, personal trauma related to Coral's death. Gil allows Nemo to channel his frustration into constructive, if risky, action, thus validating the inherent need to push against perceived limitations, a validation Marlin was emotionally incapable of providing at the start. The sequence involving the jellyfish bloom is another masterstroke in illustrating the difference between passive avoidance and active navigation. For Marlin, the bloom represents overwhelming, indiscriminate danger, a chaotic mass of stinging uncertainty that perfectly mirrors his internal state after losing Coral. His frantic, rule-based attempts to navigate through the swarm, trying to count the tentacles, trying to stay on a perfect line, fail spectacularly. It is Dory, utilizing her instinctual, almost reckless abandon, who guides them through. Her memory loss makes her less prone to calculating the potential harm of each sting. She reacts to the immediate present. This moment forces Marlin to abandon his intellectual analysis in favor of Dory's fluid, moment-to-moment adaptation. He learns that survival in an unpredictable world sometimes demands a temporary suspension of planning and an embrace of chaotic partnership. The film subtly critiques the very nature of human observation through the lens of P. Sherman, the dentist. Sherman represents the benevolent, yet ultimately detached, external world that holds the fate of the smaller creatures in its hands. He is not malicious like the barracuda or careless like Darla. He is simply preoccupied. His sketches and notes, the constant charting and naming of creatures, reflect a human desire to categorize and contain the wildness of nature. The tank gang's obsession with the dentist's address book, P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, symbolizes the human tendency to believe that knowing the name or location of something is equivalent to understanding or controlling it. Marlin's entire quest is temporarily derailed when he fixates on this terrestrial, human-defined goal, only to realize that salvation comes not from navigating human maps, but from understanding the ocean's organic language, something Dory inherently grasps. In essence, the film operates as a complex dialectic. Fear versus trust, control versus flow, memory versus presence. Marlin's transformation is the reconciliation of these opposites. He integrates the necessary caution inherited from his trauma with the essential trust taught by Dory and the necessary ambition nurtured by Gil. By the time he sees Nemo swim free of the net, Marlin is no longer just reacting to past loss. He is actively participating in his son's future identity, a father finally secure enough in his own revised worldview to allow his child to become fully realized, fines and all. The film's visual poetry extends even to the simplest forms of communication, particularly the portrayal of fear through sound and silence. Marlin's early interactions are peppered with sharp-clipped exclamations, short sentences reflecting his tightly wound emotional state. Conversely, the ocean's dangers are often heralded by sudden, overwhelming silence, as seen just before the barracuda attack, or the heavy, muffled quiet that descends when they are trapped in the deep by the anglerfish. This manipulation of the auditory landscape amplifies the sense of isolation Marlin feels when he believes himself alone in his terror. The subsequent cacophony of the whale song, or the surprisingly robust communal sounds of the fishing trawler, mark moments where Marlin is forced to integrate into a larger, louder world, a world he must trust despite its inherent volume and noise. Dory's linguistic idiosyncrasies serve a crucial, almost Freudian function in the narrative structure. Her constant misremembering forces Marlin to repeat his instructions and reveal his underlying motivations aloud, turning his internal monologue of anxiety into external, auditable dialogue. For example, when he has to explain his quest repeatedly, he is forced to articulate the depth of his love and fear in simpler, more direct terms than he would ever admit in a moment of quiet contemplation. This repetition acts as a form of therapeutic exposure therapy for Marlin, who must continually confront the object of his obsession, Nemo, through the lens of Dory's innocent queries. The dynamic between the old and new generations is perhaps most poignantly captured in the school of fish that Marlin encounters early on, shortly after losing Nemo. These fish, representing the collective, unthinking majority of the reef, panic collectively in response to a perceived, but ultimately non-existent threat. They embody conformity and the danger of inherited fear, blindly following an initial alarm without individual verification. Marlin, in his desperation, initially aligns with their panic, proving how easily even a cautious individual can succumb to the herd mentality when faced with immediate, overwhelming anxiety.